All right, guys, I'm back after round 18, and it was by far the least enjoyable week of the year. I scored a 1,978, which was a round rank of 33,000 and set me back 1,000 ranks. I copped plenty of bullets, which you'll see in just a second, and the best thing is that I now have like 8 forced trades to deal with. So then, I guess we'll go through the team. First up is the Wang, who scored a 73 as he copped some attention from Jordan, and we knew that was never going to go well. I'd already given up by this point in the week, so I didn't watch, but I believe he moved forward in the second half, and he just couldn't get it done. That's his first bad score in a very long time, though. Then I had Lockie Ash with another very serviceable score. While the world around him burns, he has been steady, and that makes it 8 tons in a row for him now. Nothing huge or exciting, but these consistent players are what you need, and it's a pity I don't have more. Harry Sheasel also did very well, bouncing back with 113. 29 touches, 6 marks and 6 tackles is exactly the sort of stat line we want to see from him. Hopefully he can get on a run of tons again, because he's been quite inconsistent in this role. Then Josh Dacos had one of the craziest matches of all time. For the first 3 quarters, he was very ordinary with 50 points and not much else. But then, in that fourth quarter, he came out and scored the second biggest quarter of all time for AFL fantasy with 82 points. And that was without getting near the ball in the final 4 minutes or so. He had 16 touches, 2 marks, 5 tackles, and kicked 2 goals. That is just genuinely ridiculous stuff. He did a similar thing earlier in the season with like 65 points, but this was a whole nother level, and I'm here for it. So good. But then Bailey Dale let me down yet again. 60 points from him is just rubbish, as he's averaging in the 70s for his last 4. That is so bad. And when I picked him, I thought he could average over 100, so I'm incredibly disappointed with all of this. And Callum Mills was also awful again. 65 from him, and he's also averaging 75 for me, which is just not good enough at all, especially when McKercher continues to do well. And on the bench, Angus Hasty scored a 39, so I probably should have just traded in a red dot. And Angus Clark scored a 30, so I probably should have traded him. Then for the midfield, and my vice-captain was Nick Dacos, who did not deliver on Friday night with a 78 against the Suns. He didn't get tagged, but a few knocks caused him some pain, and he did move forward as the game went on. Then Connor Rosie was doing all right against the Eagles before a hand or finger injury caused him to be subbed off on 58. At this point in time, I'm not too sure on the severity of this injury, but I think he might miss at least a game. He was subbed out when Port were down, so I'm not sure they would have been taking too cautious of an approach. In a game they couldn't afford to lose, probably a forced trade unless he's only out for 1 week, because there may be other bullets to consider. Andrew Brayshaw was so good for 138 points. He was super consistent with his scoring throughout the game with 4 great quarters. He ended up with 29 disposals, but it was a huge 14 tackles that allowed him to have this big ceiling score. That's his career best tackles comfortably, which you love to see. The big problem is that he copped a big hit in the final moments of the game, which caused his head to split open. Although he did go and do an interview while bleeding out, which was quite strange. Again, I haven't seen any news, but I'd imagine he could miss some time with concussion protocols. His teammate Caleb Sarong was good despite copping a bit of attention at stoppages. Sarong still managed a ton, and surprisingly, 29 touches as the Hawks opted to not tag him with Maginnis, which I thought would have been the right move. Then, Adam Chera was pretty average for a 91. He had that run of hundreds, but this is the sort of scoring he will always resort back to, which is disappointing. At least it's not a 50, but I would like something better from him. Jack Sinclair did bounce back somewhat with a low ton. I thought he would have gone all right with the Wang copping attention, and I wasn't completely wrong. He only had 22 touches, but 6 marks, 4 tackles, and a goal meant that it was his first 100 in 4 weeks, which I'll take. Marcus Bontempelli was the only thing keeping me in it this weekend, as he scored the equal highest score of the season with 166. Just huge. He had 37 disposals, 8 marks, and 12 tackles, which is a brilliant stat line. This included a 106-point second half, meaning his last two average has been almost 150. This is why I was so upset when he dropped those bad scores, because he's capable of things like this. Finally, Tom McCarthy did all right with a 72. Those 90s seem to be a bit out of reach, but this is very serviceable, especially in a time where I just shouldn't have any rookies on field to begin with. The bench was horrid as George Stevens scored 21 as he got subbed off early and will probably become a red dot, which sucks. And Will Lorenz was the sub for Port and he scored just 6, which is wonderful. Then, I don't even want to get started on my rucks because they were both absolutely rubbish. First of all, Tristan Xerri scored just 58 in an awful game against Max Gawn. He had just 22 hitouts, a season low, and 7 touches, a season low, and gave away 3 frees. Only 6 tackles saved him. And on top of that, he knocked out Tom Sparrow and will almost certainly be suspended now, which is fantastic. Rowan Marshall was ever so slightly better with a 70. He was absolutely owned by Grundy as he had a ridiculously low 13 hitouts. This score was exactly half of what he did the week prior, and he scored 34 of these points in the final quarter because he was on just 36 points at three-quarter time. Both of my rucks have easily averaged over 110 before across seasons, and yet they barely got it combined this week. Now, let's look at my forward line, and I'm guessing you've all seen went wrong for me this week, which I'll get into in just a sec. But first, Bailey Smith had another sub-ton against the Giants in his game back. He had just 26 touches, which is his lowest since round 2, but luckily did have a few marks and tackles. Along with missing games, he has actually struggled recently with 2 scores under 100. It goes to show that it's just so hard to produce that elite level of scoring across a whole season like we found out with Tim Taranto a couple years back. But now let's get into what caused my horrid week and ended my season. Nick Martin against Richmond. Something huge was coming, I was sure of it, easily over 150. I was pumped to watch this game, but then all of a sudden he gets pushed and doesn't get back up. In that moment, I knew it was over. A knee injury and subbed out on 18, which meant my captain gained me a total of 36 points. It's just unlucky. I didn't make a bad decision captaining him. You can never predict injuries, and sometimes they just happen. But that will stop me from pushing towards any somewhat competitive overall ranks. And honestly, I might struggle to stay in the top 5,000. Just caps off a really bad year, but there's not much you can do. Then Jack McRae was all right for a 90. He had a really good last quarter, and thankfully, since he's a tackling machine, he laid 11 tackles for the game, which made up half of his score. Still averaging over 100 for me, which is nice. Christian Petracca had a good one with 31 touches for 105 points. That's his second ton in 3 weeks, so I think he can stay for the season, and he'll have to anyway, because so many forwards are failing or getting injured. Anyway, happy with that. Chad Warner was pretty bad with an 82. He did save it with 54 points in the second half, but it's still far from great. I've always said he's not a player you want to own yet. Somehow he ended up in my side. And finally, we had Sam Darcy score an 88, which I'm happy with. Nothing stood out from him stat line. He just had a few possessions, a few marks and tackles, a few hitouts, and a couple of goals and behinds. Well-rounded. And on the bench, Archer May actually did quite well for a 65, so maybe he can make some coin. And in the utility, Harry Roston scored 58, which again is very decent. There's the team. Overall, I'm not happy with how it's looking at all. 5 genuine premiums scored 65 or less. That is simply unacceptable. My trades were rubbish. I had to do the rookie fix-up, but they were still bad. Hasty wasn't good for a 39, and then Stevens barely got half of that. Meanwhile, Liddy played and actually did okay. My +3 obviously goes to the Bont with a huge score, while the -3 belongs to Tristan Xerri as he didn't get injured and was just genuinely terrible. Let's quickly look at the overall rankings where the competitive teams are really starting to emerge. There's been a lot of movement in the top 100, but Hassan still leads, and then the highest score came from Kalen, who has somehow managed a 2,475, which is 500 points more than me. That's absurd. And then, in our Open League, Jacob has slid a bit overall, but still remains in first. He might have a bit of competition from Tim, though, as he's surged in the top 60, while David is just outside that in 68th overall. Nothing too crazy to mention other than the fact I'm now coming 39th in my own league, which is frankly embarrassing. I'm not even going to bother looking at my trades because I don't know who's going to be missing a lot of football. Obviously, Martin will have to go, but Rosie, Brayshaw, and Zeri could all be trades too. And there was even talk of a Sarah suspension, so with everything going on, I just have no clue on what to do. Hopefully you fared better than me, but that's all I've got today.